PokerStatic.com. We bring you the interviews you want to hear. Now with your hosts, Bret Oliverio and Eric Bickel, the Poker Static Hot Seat.
What's up? Thanks for checking out Poker Static Hot Seat. Bret Oliverio, Eric Bickel, and joining us now, Barry Greenstein. What's up, Barry? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, nice to be on your show.
Thank you. Now is that same house that we saw on High Stakes Living, where you gave the big tour and everything?
Yeah, it is. Although actually, you didn't get to see the whole tour. It's kind of a funny story. Because the funniest part of the whole tour was when I went into Joey's room. Joey used to live with me at that time because he moved from Berkeley up here because it was just easier when we were traveling around playing a lot of poker. And I went into his room, and he has a bunch of Transformers that started out from when he was a kid. And I went through and just made a bunch of funny jokes about when he does well in a tournament, I give him a Transformer. We had this whole thing. Anyway, he came home after we did that thing. And he said, "You got to be kidding! Why didn't you let me know? You shouldn't have gone in my room, and you're going to embarrass me, and all this kind of stuff." And Danny, I don't know if you know who Danny is. He's like a real good camera guy. Worked for Card Player, and he's the one who did the during the World Series. They had that all 360 or whatever it is, those 360-degree cameras. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, I did.
But anyway, Danny was afraid of putting it on in there, because he was afraid, he might end up doing stuff with Joey later, and Joey'd be mad at him. So all that stuff, that was the funniest whole thing of the tour that got cut out.
Now, if I remember correctly, your home was like, and I could be totally botching this. You were like, in different rooms, you had like different parts of your favorite casinos. Like if you liked the marble from one casino and like maybe the shades from another, you sort of incorporated a lot of that into the design of your home. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it sounds weird when you say it like that, but really what it was is I traveled around the world and saw nice things. I'd say, hey, why don't we do that here? So it's really, that was the world I lived in, so it wasn't because I wanted to feel like I was in a casino. It's just whenever I saw a nice treatment somewhere, I'm not someone who looks through design brochures or manuals or websites or whatever. It's just that was in my world. I'd see something, I'd say, hey, I like the way those curtains look, and I'd draw it or take a picture or something like that, and then give it to a designer and say, hey, can we have something like that? I thought it was really neat when I saw it in a room that I was in.
Why do you kind of refer to it in the past tense, though, Barry? Like when you travel the world, you're still traveling, you're still playing tournaments around the world.
Well, I guess. Right now when I travel, I'm staying at regular hotels. Most of my traveling is. I actually didn't travel much last year to tournaments. I played on the West Coast. So if I play on the West Coast, I either was at home or I was at our condo in Vegas. I have a condo in Vegas, so I'm not staying in those nice suites anymore because we just have a condo in Vegas. So that's part of it. And I didn't travel too much. I went to London. I went. For the EPT, for the WSOP Europe and the EPT London, and really didn't do much last year. I kind of got tired of the traveling. And like I say, mainly it's because I'm not, playing, big in the pit or anything like that, staying at the high quality suites, unless Phil Ivey drags me along for one of his craps tours.
Now I know when you first came up, Barry, you were a cash game specialist. You always referred to them as the side games. And then, the tournament scene became so crazy, the purses became so big, and there became all of this other EV and actually, final tabling and winning a bracelet and things of that nature that you really jumped into tournament poker big time. Where do you, fall into it now? Like, do you consider yourself more of a tournament player than a cash game player, or are you still playing the cash games and we don't know about it nearly as much?
Well, first of all, I didn't jump in for any of the reasons that you gave.
Okay.
I was doing real well at the time, and what happened is, again, I don't know how far you guys go back in poker, but there was something called Poker Superstars.
Sure.
I remember that
on first big
Fox
TV
Sports
shows.
Net.
Yeah, and everybody had all this tournament stuff. I didn't play tournaments, and I was doing real well at that point. I was doing better than anyone else in the biggest game, and so I got in as a cash game player, as one of the top. They had kind of trying to build as the 8 best players, which obviously best players and poker, really those two things don't usually go together. How do you really rank who the best players are? But that's how they kind of build the TV show. And then they said, what are we going to say about you? You've won a lot of money. And I said, well, whatever. And they said, for the audience to understand, because tournaments get shown on TV. I'd never been on TV for poker. And, Maury just said, we have nothing to put under your name, except that you're a top cash game player. And I said, well, I could play those tournaments. If I played tournaments, I'm sure I'd win one, if I played a few. So I said, I'll tell you what, by the time this stuff airs, I'll go out. And usually I only play the main event at the World Series for poker. And I used to play the first event was always a big event. Actually, in those days, probably was a limit event, not no limit. Limit was bigger than no limit. I said, I always, we used to play the first event, the last event, and maybe the deuce to 7. And I said, I'll play a few more tournaments. And I didn't really play the first year of the World Poker Tour. I played the one at the Bellagio, and I didn't travel. I'd never traveled for a poker tournament. And I said, I'll travel to a few tournaments. So I went on cruises, and I ended up going out to Mississippi. Anyway, so the first year I won a bracelet, and I won a World Poker Tour event. And it was just, I just said to Maury, I'm going to do it so you can stick something under my name. Because, if you're a cash game player, and then you play tournaments, it's such a different level of play that you feel like you're playing with kids. And nowadays you are.
Right.
It's not the same. But it's not that there isn't a skill. There's things to learn in tournaments. It's a different skill set. Beating up on bad players is different. Because now, if you're playing the best games, you're still, some players are better than others. You might be targeting players a little bit, but in tournaments especially, you're saying, these 3 guys are so bad, or players are so bad. I'm going to get my chips from them. I'm going to go after them. This guy can easily be bluffed out. This guy can't be bluffed out. The diversity in the play is very great. And of course nowadays, because players have gotten better, you don't see it so much. Let's say in a West Coast like Bellagio WPT, but the main event is more like what it used to be, where you get such diversity in play, a lot of bad players, and you're racing with some of the other good players to get a hold of chips. So when you all meet, you'll have enough to compete.
Right, but are you still?
But anyway, so that was the reason I did it, and that, sorry to cut you off, and that's why I ended up giving that money away to charity, is because that wasn't my real job.
Right.
That was just something kind of screwing around.
Right.
And I only figured, I'm not going to play that many tournaments. Remember, it wasn't like now where you have probably a big tournament almost every week somewhere. In those days, once a month I'd travel. I figured, okay, what the heck, I'll travel to a WPT. They were about once a month. If I happen to do well, I'll give the money away. And so you can see why I kind of looked at it that way. It was kind of free money to me. And I just got this idea in my head that, hey, if I ever make a final table, which didn't take me very long, obviously, and I gave it away to charity, my whole thinking at the time was that could be really big for these charities, and I thought it was going to make a better impression, not necessarily the poker world, but just kind of anyone who had a lot of money would say, hey, look at this. Everyone's chasing this $1 million prize pool. I mean, I don't think I'd win $1 million, and this guy just gives it away. And I thought, I might kind of spark something in, like, rich businessmen, for example. Say, all these people racing to have the most money on the Forbes list, say, hey, what are we trying to raise for money? We should be doing something good with the money. And even if you take, and it's more of a Republican idea, the government not having as much control of your money, well, going along with this means you should have some responsibility, and you should be able to do the right thing with your money. So that was the whole kind of idea I had. And it ended up kind of going a little different. I mean, the amazing thing is I won, $1 million, actually, with like almost $1.3 million tournament on the World Poker Tour and gave the money away, which, it was a lot of pressure actually at the time, because I was thinking so many kids, I was giving a lot of money to Children Incorporated, are dependent on me to do well, and this whole impression I wanted to create. And it wasn't anything for me. It was like, it's a little big to say, but almost for mankind, it's just to let people know, chasing money, which is what we all do, that there's a much bigger reason to have money, and something much better you can do with your money. But the way it came out, and I don't know, again, for people nowadays how they see it all, but at the time it ended up kind of being a neat thing for poker players, because we all kind of realized that we're spending our lives doing this, and is it the right thing to do? Shouldn't we be doing something more productive? Is always a question you ask. And obviously there are even are we taking money away from people who need it at times? It can sometimes be a question. But now this kind of turned it all on its side for a lot of people, where they said, hey, this is really neat. That if you make a lot of money, you can do something good with the money. You don't have to buy a new car. You don't have to buy a new house. You do something really good. And so a lot of people, wherever I went, kind of embraced it, almost like that was what they want to do also. And I still have that from young guys starting in poker and playing tournaments who feel like if I make extra money, it's not like I'm just going to compete to have more money. I'm going to do something positive. We've seen that with a lot of the young players. We've seen a lot of charities since then. It's hard to say what my contribution is to that whole thing, but it certainly helped kind of with the mindset of a lot of the poker players of putting it all in perspective. We shouldn't just care about money above all. We should do good things.
Right. But, and part of my original question that got you on that road was, how do you consider yourself now these days? Because my understanding, the cash games don't run nearly as much as they used to. We see you out and play all the big tournaments. Now you're a member with Poker Stars. They want you to be at all the big tournaments. Do you see yourself as more of a tournament player these days? Have you grown to love them?
Yeah, I'm in love. No, I'm a cash game player at heart, and that's where I make my money. And actually, I've got a blog I've got to put up about how I did the World Series, which was I lost $150,000 or something like that in tournaments. I support myself playing cash games. I still go to the Commerce and play. I play poker and cash games, just about every day, whether it's online or live. Much of it live. But I'm able to make, actually, what I am is I'm a cash game player / Poker Stars representative. I make a decent amount from Poker Stars for wearing, hey, should I have the patch on now? Or, for wearing their patch. And being involved in their different projects and TV shows. I have to go to Vegas in a couple days to do that $1 Million Challenge thing. Then I have to go back to Vegas in 2 weeks to do the Big Game Cash show. So I have these different responsibilities with Poker Stars. One of the nice things about doing well in tournaments, if you do well enough and you become recognizable, then you can get kind of a cushy job, I guess you'd call it, where people pay you good money just to put a patch on yourself and answer some questions for guys like you.
Yeah, no, but it is still a job. I mean, you're traveling around the world. You're grinding, and even at the World Series, I imagine being part of Poker Stars, you got to stop, talk to fans, sign autographs. I mean, I imagine in between breaks of a long, grueling tournament, you got to stop and talk to fans, and can't blow anyone off because you're a public figure. I mean, what's that like for you?
Forget it. I'm not going to answer that. Oh, that's blowing up. No. No, actually, the tournament, the World Series is a little different, and I guess we have even the W Coop for the online stuff on Poker Stars coming up. I enjoy that kind of stuff because that's competition. I like to play, and especially it's fun. Nowadays you have a lot of the young players think they invented poker. I think it's pretty funny. And I get thrown into the bundle with what they consider the old guard. And a lot of the young players don't understand the difference between, I was a cash game player, not a tournament player. And they'll talk about how now the young players are better than the old guard. They're comparing themselves to old tournament players, not people like me. They don't realize there's a big difference. So it's still fun to compete, especially as I get older. I think I'll be able to compete for another 20 to 30 years, actually, with those players. So I enjoy the World Series. I plan on making a lot of money during the World Series. This is about the first year I didn't. So that was no fun. But that's not a grind to me at all. I played poker my whole life. That's not like I always hear people talk about a grueling schedule. I'm 50-something years old, and for me, playing poker all day in the tournaments and going to a cash game at 2 in the morning is, what I do. It's what I'm used to doing. It's not tough for me. So I like the competition. I don't like failing and doing poorly, but that goes along when you compete. You don't always win, so it makes the winning nice. So that's not a grind. Talking to fans and stuff, that's not that tough for me either. I didn't think it was something that I would embrace, and I remember, I'd see these guys, especially Phil, because obviously a close friend of mine. He would play the tournaments, be on TV. I used to make fun of him about that stuff, and I'd see people come up, want to take a picture, and I told them if I ever play in tournaments, which I didn't think I'd ever do, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. That's what I told him. And the guy who straightened me out on that was actually Rene Angelil. And I don't know if you know Rene. He's Celine Dion's husband. Real nice guy. And he said, he heard me say that. He said, you're wrong. And Rene, never says anything negative to anyone. And so he said, you should embrace that. He said, when people want your autograph, that's a way of them saying, or kind of announcing that you've done well in your profession. That's a good thing. You should embrace it. You should understand it like that. You shouldn't ever turn anyone away. And when it finally happened to me, and I planned on not, I initially planned on telling people I'm not going to sign an autograph because I've never asked for anyone's autograph. I'm not into celebrity and that kind of stuff. Then I realized it's a nice thing, and as I've come to, be better known, the way I look at this whole thing of celebrity and poker and signing autographs and taking pictures, it's a small thing you can do that makes people happy.
Right.
I get some of these little things. I even get these Make-A-Wish foundations and other things like that, whether it's kids or older people dying of cancer or other diseases, want to talk to me on the phone or want to do something. I've had some of those. That usually happens, a couple times a year. And it's just amazing, these people who are dying or something or have something happen, how happy you can make them for a 5 or 10 minute phone call, or at the World Series, take a picture with someone, sign something. It makes them happy. I mean, how else are you going to get an opportunity to make people that happy over something that really doesn't take that much out of you? So no, it's not a big deal to stop and take a picture. And so it doesn't even bother me because, mainly because the way I look at it, it's a positive thing.
How did you?
I'm lucky to be in that position.
I'm sorry, Barry. How did you get that, though? I mean, this spirit that you have of giving, of being charitable, of the players that you mentor, and constantly looking out for others, and yet the dichotomy of that is you're a poker player and you're after their money, and you're bluffing and you're stealing and you're doing everything that's involved in poker. I don't know. It's a weird dichotomy. It's amazing to me. I wonder, where did you get that from? Did it come from your parents? Did it come from a mentor that you had? Where did that come from?
I don't bluff anymore. I always make sure I have the best hand. So
Right. Right.
Right.
I don't think it's as noble as you're kind of making it out, frankly, because as a poker player, you are kind of cutthroat. I mean, I'm not dishonest,
right, but
I'm trying to win. I'm trying to take people's money. So I don't think I'm as nice a guy as, there's me and there's my persona.
Right.
We all have personas once we're on TV. My persona is probably a nicer person than I am. But I think it's just a really simple thing that most people should have. If they don't, they kind of miss something growing up. And that's, when you see what the right thing is, and I talk to my kids still who are all over 20, but they don't do it, that a lot of times you can see the right thing versus the wrong thing. You should do the right thing. It's real simple. And when you live in a world, if you can do something nice, it's better than doing something mean. And, so they're just really simple concepts. maybe fall into the category of what you learned in kindergarten type of stuff. So it's not really that deep. I've just been in a position where occasionally I can do what's obviously the right thing. When I first won that big tournament, I still remember, called my dad up who, didn't know much about the tournaments. I told him, hey, I won this tournament. And I had mentioned to him that I was going to travel some tournaments, so I won. I was going to give away the money. And then he said to me, what'd you win? I said, $1.3 million. He said, oh, are you giving some of that away? I said, no, I'm giving it all away. He said, well, I remember you saying that, but that's too much money to give away, isn't it? And I said, I can afford it, and I said, no, it's just, I'm going to do it. And once I did, and the different projects I had, because Children Incorporated is my main charity, I gave away to that and different things. But what came out of it, it was one of those, almost epiphanies after I did it, where that was the right thing to do. And you can see, even you guys ask me about it wherever I go, and all these other things that have come out of it that are good, it was the right thing to do. And, how many times in your life, because most of us were in the rat race, we're struggling, we're trying to pay our bills. Most of us don't even have the opportunity to get to the level where we can do the right things. We're too busy trying to feed our families. So I got lucky to get to that position at that point in time. Now, the economy's gone down. I've lost a lot in real estate. It's kind of funny. I have different holdings. I was talking to someone yesterday where they were saying, why don't you sell that off? I said, well, because then I have to give a couple $100,000 to the, because it's worth less than the mortgage, things like that. I've gone through, I've lost a lot of money. I mean, it's even funny, I wasn't playing in some of the bigger games. I was mainly playing tournaments where I had side bets, trying to make money that way. And someone was saying that, you're not playing in they've some really big games we've seen with the Frenchmen and people like that. Why aren't you playing in those? And I said, really, it's, too much money for me at this point. And I saw some people even play with me in the big game saying, oh, yeah, Barry's had a downswing in cash game. I said, oh, really? And I hear that sometimes, these whispers and things like that. I say, well, isn't it funny? No one was around to take that money from me because I didn't lose it in the poker games. It was just I lost a lot of money in the stock market. I lost a lot of money in the real estate. The economy was bad. Made a lot of bad decisions there. But I can't remember where I was going with this thing.
But let me ask you, are you tempted at the same time? I mean, you have so many friends in the poker world, Ivy amongst one. Are you tempted to say, hey, Phil, why don't you put me in this game? Or are you not comfortable doing that sort of thing in a big cash game?
According to Nick Rainey, he already was. So
yeah, what's the story?
I heard on that. So I was telling Phil, you owe me money. Well, what happens is, in fact, we had it during the World Series too, where I made some bets with Durr. Phil, and I had kind of an understanding on some things now that he's got more money than I do. He'll take any extra of some of my bets in certain situations. It was kind of funny. I don't know if I should say it. I don't want to embarrass Tom, but I guess it's okay. He's a good guy. I had this one bet with him in the Omaha 8 or better, and Tom had all these bets. Tom played just about every event, and we had a final table bet, me against Tom, and I had a really bad table. It was like almost everyone at my table was there just for Omaha 8 or better, the 10K Omaha 8 or better. And at his table, it was a joke. There was no one good. The only one who was any good was Miami John.
Right.
And the rest of them were really, really bad. It was a real weak table. And he wanted to last longer. And with Tom, I had to lay him odds, ridiculous odds on all these bets. And I kept on saying, hey, everyone's saying you're this great player. Come on, you can't have some old guy like me laying the odds. I had to lay him like 3-2 and sometimes 2-1 on these different bets. And the only thing we even bet even, I still refuse to take odds from him at even PLO or Nolan Hole. I kept saying, hey, maybe you should give me odds back in your good games. But, I'm still probably better. Tom's a good player, but he's mainly a short-handed specialist. So in 9-handed poker, even at Nolan Hold'em or PLO, I don't think I'm yet over the hill enough to be laying him odds. But if I could get getting odds from him, if I could get odds, I'd do it. But anyway, in the limit games, I had to lay him odds, and so I bet him. I don't know. I maybe laid him $70,000 to $40,000 or something like that, making the final table. And then I mentioned it to Phil, and he said, "Well, how much can you bet on that?" I said, "Well, that's about as much as I want to bet." He said, "Bet $1 million." I said, "Look at his table. He's got a bunch of morons at his table. Look at my table." He says, "What's the difference?" And I said, "What do you mean, what's the difference? It's a big difference. You don't think it matters?" Sometimes he acts like that. He says, "Well, I understand it's bad for you that you're at a bad table, but it doesn't matter for him that he's a good table. He has no chance. You have some chance." He said, "Bet $1 million. I'll take whatever you want." So we kind of have this thing where when I have these bets, if I get extra actions, I have to go to Tom. I say, "Okay, we can put an extra zero on it." And that extra zero was going to be Phil's bet, but as it ends up,
it's mainly a prop bet thing between you and Phil, because I heard you talking about this on the 2+2 Poker Cast as well. So it's not that, because you sort of clarified the same thing there, if I remember correctly.
It's just for extra action. Phil's got more money than I do now, and then we get in situations. He always wants action, and I think it came from Nick, who works with Patrick, and I played Patrick some real big Chinese poker, and that was the year before. And, Phil said, again, I would have played 1,000 a point, which is about as much as I want to play for. It's still a pretty big game. But Patrick is, a guy like Phil. They don't have as many responsibilities as I do. And at this point, they have more money to play with. Where Patrick will play 5, 10. They end up playing like 15,000 a point Chinese poker, which is ridiculous. And so Phil just said, "Okay, whatever action I don't want, he'll take." And for him, of course, it's not even... It's enough to get interested, but I still am playing for more relatively nowadays than he is.
Right.
When we do things like that.
Can you describe your relationship with Phil, like kind of how it developed? I mean, I assume it's just something that developed from playing the side games together, and you guys just sort of developed this friendship. But it seems to be even more than that. You seem to have a special relationship, the two of you.
Well, certainly when he was coming up, he would say I helped him with poker more than anyone else. Where I first knew him, when someone first pointed him out to me, I guess he had won a bracelet at the World Series of Poker. Someone told me he was going to be a good player, and then I played with him, and I said, he was horrible. And I said, I don't think this kid's going to ever be a good player. That was my first impression of him. Then about a year or two later, I played with him at the main event, and it was probably his first deep run in the main event. It wasn't the year Moneymaker won. It was probably the year Veraconi won it. And people don't even realize that year he should have won it that year. He was the chip leader, and the second in chips, or near that, was a guy, I can't remember his name, but Phil flopped a set of threes. The flop came like ace-5-3. And Phil flopped a set of threes, and the guy had ace-king, and they got all the money in for just a monster chip lead. Maybe his name is John Shipley. That makes sense. And they played this huge pot the third day. Phil was at my table, and Phil was going to have like just a ridiculous lead, and he was playing great. I couldn't believe how well he played, because truthfully, he wasn't very good at no limit hold'em. He was just kind of a good poker player. I don't see that much nowadays. These young kids who think they're good players. We have a lot of specialists. Phil didn't even really know how to play, like fundamentally no limit hold'em, but he was so good at knowing what other people were doing because he was a good poker player that I was really impressed for the first time in his game. I said, God, he's really doing the right things. His betting amounts aren't always great, and he does some things fundamentally wrong, but just at exploiting people and knowing what they have and making thin value bets and doing all these kind of things. It didn't matter that it was no limit hold'em whatever the game. He was really a stud player, but he just was really on top of what everyone was doing. He was, but then this hand came up, and they got all the chips in, and it came, ace-king. And the guy made aces full against Phil's threes full, and he went on. If you look, he ended up having like a 2-1 chip lead over second place at the final table, and eventually went out seventh, I think it was, and all those chips that were supposed to be Phil's. Phil, that was, how people know Phil's had 4 deep runs in the main event. That was the first one. And it's the one that people don't even know what really happened. He got extremely unlucky and still ended up, like in the top 25 or so, but he lost this huge pot. So then I realized, hey, he played really well, and then we got to talking and stuff, and not that much. He wasn't a friend of mine or anything like that. But eventually, Phil, like any young player, went up through stakes, and he wanted to play in the Larry game. And stud was his best game. He played from Atlantic City, and he played. I probably first played a 4 and 800 game with him, and then he came to the Larry game, which was bigger. Kind of took his whole bankroll, and again, it was his best game, but he still wasn't the level of the top players. And he struggled initially, and the one thing, but I don't know why he didn't have a car. Well, he didn't live out here, but I gave him a ride home a couple times from the game, and he would just ask me all sorts of questions. Why did I do this on a hand? What was going on? Because I was at that point probably the best player in the game, or one who was doing the best, and try to incorporate some of the things I was doing. And he was real inquisitive. People always look at Phil as this guy who's the natural and didn't work on his game, but it's nothing like that at all. That's all he did was play and think poker and try to see what other people were doing that was better than what he was doing. And so I was a guy he could kind of do that with. And I didn't know if he'd make it or not. I just said to him one day, and I even helped him out sometimes, lent him money and stuff like that to play. We didn't have a lot of players. I said, it really helped me out if you were good enough to stick in the game, because Larry won't play unless it's at least 6-handed. I need a couple guys. It was a big game. We didn't have that many players, so I wanted him to succeed. And I think one of the things now that Phil obviously is at the top of the game that he remembers, and you see this about Phil, a lot of times you'll see him with guys he knew when he was in high school, stuff like that. Anyone who's done Phil a favor or helped him out, he remembers. And I think what he remembers of me, and one of the reasons, now that he's a big shot, we have a good friendship, is when he wasn't a big shot, it didn't matter to me. And now, when you're someone like Phil, and even to a small degree someone like myself, once you've kind of made it, now you have a lot of, I don't want to say hangers-on, but people who like you for who you've become, whether it's guys or, you even get it with women. If you get a woman to hit on you now, especially me at my age, it's something to laugh. Oh, my girlfriend's in the background. It's something that she was laughed to. I laugh at it. Like, we have a joke. Some girl will come up to me and say stuff, hey, you want to go out? And a lot of times I'll even say, especially I've got to say this now that Alex is here.
Yeah, seriously.
I'll say, talk to my girlfriend. Talk to my girlfriend about it, because it's like a joke. I think it's kind of funny, because I don't really think it's me that they're talking to. It's this persona, like I say. And it's even more so for a guy like Phil. Anyone who talks to Phil, male or female, in the back of their mind, it's because he's Phil Ivey. He's this guy who's really successful. This guy who has a lot of money. And they're almost trying to get one of those two things: his friendship because he's a big shot, or his money because he's got a lot of money. It's not you. It's not real. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So So you can only really trust people from before you had money. I've been with my girlfriend for a long time. I can trust her even when I didn't have a lot of money. She's there. She was there. And so it's this whole thing. So going back to your question, it's like I never answered the question. I was friends with Phil before he was a big shot. He knows that. He knows it doesn't matter to me. And it's like anyone new, he doesn't trust 100%.
Right. Now that makes sense. And I want to ask you about, we talked to a lot of the high stakes players about Phil, and somehow he's the best online poker player in the world, cash game player. Is he at home? Because we have to believe he's doing this. He's doing his homework. He's crunching the numbers. He's analyzing, reviewing hand histories, just putting in the time and the work as an online poker player, or does it just come that easy to him where he can log on and win millions and be the best? Not even close.
I've never looked at a hand history, and I'm sure Phil hasn't either. That's the first thing.
Sick.
He's never done any crunching. That's not the way. That's the new way of studying things, and there's good stuff in there to learn a particular opponent, as we saw with Isildur. Studying that stuff and learning the tendencies. Obviously, you can be better at analyzing things that way. But when you're playing, especially, what Phil does is play a lot of short-handed poker, where the guy, even learning him through that session. It's not the same thing when you have a smaller pool of players. You learn your players. maybe you don't have the exact numbers types of things, but I think it's overstated how important that is. I don't do it, so maybe I'm understating it. And I'm not as good an online player as I am a live player, whereas Phil is as good looks like he is as good an online player as live player. No, he's not doing any of that. He's doing it the way he always did, and I do it the way I always did, which is know certain players' tendencies. And again, when you have a smaller pool of players, you learn each player and what their tendencies, and you play them accordingly. So it's none of that. But thinking about the game, yeah, I'm sure if you've looked, I got, we've been on Poker Road, I've got some funny quotes, and one of them about Phil is, at times I'll tell him how the players play, because I know the players usually better than he does. Even some of the guys he'd play with on Full Tilt. And initially he'd say, I don't want to know anything about that. It's more fun this way. Sometimes they get ahead of me at the beginning. They think they're going to beat me. It makes it like he enjoyed the sporting of it. Some of these guys were talking about how they're the top players and Phil would take them down. It's just fun for him. And so he'd almost rather not know. But obviously he's going to play some guy head up. He's going to learn his game. And that's what he's strong at, learning people's games, learning what the holes are, learning how to exploit it. And, Phil is the best from what I've seen at that whole thing of learning how someone else plays and learning what works against their strategy. And in the end, you always hear these people with poker and numbers and all that stuff. I think they're missing the point. They're playing blackjack from what I see more than poker. I don't. Other than you'll have people come in and say all these young guys play so great. Well, you don't hear that from me because it doesn't look like they play any better than I did when I was 20 years old. Still, I mean, there are more good players. But they didn't invent poker. What's different nowadays is poker terminology. You have new terminology for the different things that are done. Balancing your ranges and all these different things are names for things I certainly did at their age also. But where was I going? What I find with the
young players?
When you hear people saying with the young players how good they are, usually the people saying this are people who made their money. Most people you talk to aren't top cash game players. You're talking to top tournament players. And again,
true.
The young players are better than the tournament players. Of course, when I was young, I was better than the tournament players too. It's a different thing. But what was I going to get? We were talking about.
Well, you hear a guy like
I'm just talking about instead of numbers and knowing what people's doing as tendency. Oh, here's what I wanted to say. I played during the World Series, and there's some plays I didn't like, but they were decisions. When you play poker, maybe pre-flop, you have a certain range of hands. You have certain hands you'll 3-bet. You have certain things you do, and of course you do things differently against different players. And maybe the young player looks at now in terms of VPIP and 3-bet percentage and all this kind of stuff. I don't have those numbers in my head, and I don't think of poker the same way they do in numbers. But ultimately, it comes down to decisions of what to do. It's not anything really that you could just take from those numbers. It's you've made a raise, someone's made a raise back. Do you fold, call, or raise at this point? You have decisions to make, and you factor in that person, and maybe the young player has numbers in his head that represent who that person is. I don't have those numbers. But it still comes down to a decision. And obviously playing live at the World Series of Poker, even those young players, they maybe think of it in terms of numbers that we're talking about. I don't. But at different times, I didn't make the right decision. And that's where it all is. And I even had, I'm going to put it up today, I think, our guy is going over some hands on the big game. I sometimes do this thing on Tips from the Bear on Poker Road where I talk about hands that I played. And it's never something like this guy comes in, to a pot, so many percent of the time and does this so many percent of the time. It comes down to this play against this player. I had a decision to make. And, if you're a better player, you make the right decision more often than the wrong decision. And really with Phil or me or any player, the guy who's making the most right decision ends up being the best player, because these decisions are usually really big decisions money-wise. They're sometimes your stack type of decisions, making the right decisions here to re-raise and take someone off their hand, or to fold and not lose your stack. Those are the huge decisions in poker. Those other fundamental plays are important. And the players now, I think, are fundamentally stronger. Like in any game, any sport, gets better over time. You have more good players. But these stack-wise decisions, it's one of the reasons why it's really hard for me, even, like I would not sit down in the top game against the best players who are playing no limit hold'em every day and want to play, because these guys are doing it every day and I do it very rarely. They're going to be making the right decisions if they're in the flow of the game more than I am. There's not a good earn for me. I'd rather play in mixed games where this is something I do every day. I am in the flow of the game. That's the strength of my game. So when people say, oh, what do you think of all these, Tom Dwan, Patrick, Phil, I don't look at these guys and marvel, boy, these guys play circles around me. I look at it more, these guys are doing that every day and playing a lot of no limit hold or PLO. They're in stroke, I'm not. There's no way I'm going to compete with someone who's specializing in certain things. I can't compete with that guy, because when the big decision comes up, I'm going to make the, I'm not going to make the right play as often as they do. You see what the problem is? And back 25 years ago, I was playing no limit hold'em every day. That was my best game. And then people come in those days, sometimes we get a limit player come in and play, and of course it was a joke, playing people who that isn't their specialty. And that's where the disadvantage is. Fortunately, the times you see me playing no limit hold'em is on these TV shows. That's about the only time I play no limit hold'em cash, is on a high stakes poker, now on Poker Stars on the big game. And they have enough players who aren't that good that I can still play with those other guys that I mentioned at the table and still have a positive expectation and do well. But even still, each year, whether it's high stakes poker or now with the big game, I've had some plays where I was really unhappy with my decision. I felt like it's always a question of me, is it because I'm older now? I don't think it's that much, although my processing speed has slowed down as I've gotten older. It's more like I'm not in sync with the game because it's not what I do every day. I think that's what hurts me the most.
Do you have any desire to play either the biggest games online or get back to playing the biggest no limit hold'em PLO games? I know you're playing 200, 400 mixed games. You're still playing huge, but do you have any desire to play like the absolute biggest games?
No, because it means, well, I'd like to if I could make money at it, but the thing is, it means you have to do that every day. And, the money's not there. I'd be at a disadvantage initially. I don't have the time or the interest to spend, months playing every day, grinding. To really do it correctly, I'd probably have to start at, let's say, at the Commerce or online, whatever, playing in whatever level it is that I could. Online would probably be, let's say, the 25-50 or something like that, playing and grinding there. I don't enjoy it that much. I like playing mixed games. I get bored playing the same game all the time. It'd be work. It'd be more work than it's worth to me to eventually try to prove that I can beat the best players. That's never been my goal in poker. It's never really been this big ego thing to say I can play with I can play with the best players in the game. But right now, if I sat down and you took whatever the top 6 players, I guess it's something like Daniel does, who play in the high stakes cash games on Poker Stars, and sit with them 6-handed, I would guess I would be a dog, especially online, maybe not live. The funny thing is, I thought that's what was going to happen during the 25K tournament. They had the 6-max 25K at the World Series.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it ended up being so much softer than you could ever imagine. Because a lot of these young guys kind of took poker back 50 years. Well, Nolan Hold'em wasn't invented 50 years ago, but into the early days where they were trying to outplay people so much that they were so easily exploitable. You just got people 3-betting and 4-betting with garbage a lot. One of them happened to be Dan Kelly, who his big pot, he 3-bet with 4-7 offsuit and flopped a straight, took out an overpair, and it went on to win it. But a lot of these guys were doing so much, it's stuff that they probably should be doing in like later position pre-flop, like the big blind or something. But they were doing it first position, second position, having 4 guys behind them and getting picked off a lot. Instead of me, I thought I was going to have to really have my dancing shoes on and try and outplay these guys. And I realized these guys have like lost it. And I just had to sit there. And if you watch me, I just sat there. Eventually someone would do something, and I did win a couple races, which helps. I won with queens against ace king, and obviously it was a keep out. But outside of that, I just had people trying to bluff me out, and people in there with bad hands, and just sat there. And eventually got to where I was one of the chip leaders, and then I had the fateful hand with 25 people to go, where I had 2 aces against ace-8 of diamonds. Ended up getting all our money in for where I'd been big chip leader at that point with 25 to go. It's actually bigger than they reported. And a guy named Frank Casella, it looks like, was running better than other people this World Series, and he had a flush on the river. We did get actually, they didn't even report right. I overraised him pre-flop where he shouldn't have called. He got like 20%. He got a big percentage of his chips in pre-flop, and then he flopped a flush draw, and then we got it, and he made the flush on the river. But that tournament ended up playing a lot easier than I could have ever imagined. We had a lot of the good young players that instead of playing were dancing, and if you didn't dance, it put you at a big advantage.
Which players, you care to name them? Which of the young players were getting crazy?
Let's say the usual suspects. I mean, all these guys are good players, but I think it became an ego thing, and I think maybe when you're young, it is more of an ego thing where no one wanted to get outplayed. And we even have this one guy, like in my first table, one of the top young players. This guy was playing real solid. He's a young player. I don't even know his name. I saw him at the Bellagio later. I think Bern Kenny busted him on some, where Bern Kenny ended up getting to the chip lead. First he beat Phil's. Phil had 2 kings and Bern had ace king. Bern, I guess, had an ace on the river against Phil to bust him. Then a little later, the guy told me the hand, but this kid, and I don't know who he is, he's about close to 30 years old. He was at my first table. The way he got to the chip lead is he had flopped a set and someone overplayed their hand and gave him all their money. Then a little while later, he raised, someone re-raised. He 4-bet the guy called with ace-jack. He had 2 aces, the flop came 10 high, and they had like 200-300 big blinds, and it went bet, raise, re-raise, shove or something, all the money in. He had aces against ace-jack.
Right.
And he got into this huge chip lead, and it was against, if I told you, I'm not going to embarrass the guy, he's a friend of mine, but it was this whole thing of people wanting to take other people off hands, and if you just waited and at least picked up a hand once in a while, you got so much play on your hand, and that's one of the weaknesses I see a lot of the young players is knowing who's doing something and how much they're doing. It's like they play their game. They don't care who's there. And they want to run over people. And it's kind of maturity, and when we go back to a Phil Ivey, it's the one thing that he does better than a lot of these young guys, is he knows who to play against and who not to play against. And, that was the maturity I saw in his game. When I first saw him, one of the weaknesses is he was always bulldozing. Same with Patrick. When Patrick was coming up, Patrick would play his game. He didn't care who he was playing against. And sometimes I'd say to him, that guy's a tight player. That guy's not going to give you action. Or that guy's even afraid of you. Or it's one of the things you do in poker. Like even when I was coming up, one thing I knew better than a lot of these guys I'm describing is there were people who I might think played, let's say, better than I did or were tough players. Well, I would stay away from them. And if I played against them, I'd have the goods. And then there were other players that I could do stuff against. And I'd be 3-betting them with anything and taking them off hands and bluffing them, whatever. But I play differently against different people. It's kind of a fundamental thing you do in poker as a good player. And what would often happen now is these good players would see me dancing and doing all this stuff. And, it's kind of funny. I have a different reputation for high-stakes poker. But I was always known as a really crazy bluffer and a very loose player. But I do it selectively. Now someone else would think, I do it against them also. But against them, I knew they were a good player. I'd be afraid to do it. They'd give me action at the wrong time. Against them, I'd have the goods. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so it's a maturity that a lot of these young players still have to get to that a guy like Phil has gotten to. and he's playing differently against different players. I mean, he ended up folding, one of the key hands at the final table last year. People criticized him, 2 jacks against Antoine Saud. But I don't even know if he made a mistake. It just happened the guy made a play with 2 sevens and played him off it. But one of the things that happens in these tournaments that you also have to factor in, and it happened in my hand against Durr where I folded aces against his queen 10, and it happened in another hand where I played on TV, and it's happened a few times. One thing you kind of miss sometimes, and Phil told me at the time, he told me he folded the jacks against suit, and I said, "You sure that was the right play?" And he said, "I'll bet you $1 million that was the right play." Or he had ace king. So he had only 3 hands, ace, king, aces, or kings, and he was wrong. One of the things you got to factor in with these TV things, and I don't ever like being on TV tables, so I'm glad when a lot of these, I call them bozos, like to ham it up for the camera and they get the attention that I don't, is because what happens when you're on a TV table is some of the players end up being less predictable. You get some plays made and some bluffs that come up because it's a televised table and people are going to see this. You get the Brad Booth thing he did against Phil, whatever. That doesn't happen on the untelevised tables. And so you can make a mistake against these guys playing out of character. Much easier to play off the televised table where you still get them playing their, let's say, normal games and not trying to make a show-off kind of play. So as a good player, you might say, well, you should be able to take advantage of that. But it's still easier to play someone in character than doing something out of character because you don't know the people that well a lot of times. Right. Or maybe it'll take you several hours to learn what they might do.
What about a guy like Daniel, who has struggled on a lot of these televised cash games, but at the same time, it seems like he's really working hard on his game, and I know he's been posting on 2+2, and he's trying to play a lot. He's got some impressive results, I think, in the last 6 months or so playing online. How would you evaluate Daniel's game, and why has he not had the results live or I mean on these televised cash games? What's going on there?
Well, because he's actually playing a disadvantage. You have to remember, like myself, I was a no-limit cash game player for years and years and traveled, a road player, traveled, in the early days of Hold'em, traveled to Houston, traveled to all the places. That was my game. That's not what Daniel did. Daniel was one of the top tournament players. Obviously still is one of the top tournament players. And Daniel's one of his best games, probably, what I used to think of his best games, probably Omaha 8 or better. It was one of Daniel's good games. And when it comes to No Limit Hold'em, Daniel became one of the top No Limit Hold'em tournament players. You didn't hear about Daniel going and playing in the top No Limit Hold'em cash games. And tournaments are different. And part of it is, and even your game goes backwards playing in tournaments, because in tournaments it's a different skill set, as we say. There are different things you do. You're trying to exploit weak players. Daniel's obviously shown he can do this. So he, part of the things that people are looking at, they're saying, oh, Daniel's just this old guard player that the game has passed him up. The real truth is, what he got good at was a different game than what they got good at. He got good at no-limit tournaments, and he probably is still better than those people he's playing. But no-limit tournaments are very different than no-limit cash games. So really what's happened is Daniel, and maybe even for the first time in his life, has had to learn no-limit cash games against good players. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
He's learning something different. So instead of people saying, oh, it's because Daniel is a bad player, it's more like Daniel never really did get good at what he's being viewed at. And then you throw in what happened to Daniel is he did have a lot of bad luck. It's like when he first played in these the big televised cash games, in all fairness to him, it seemed like any time Daniel had a straight, someone else had a set, and then the board paired.
Right, totally.
And repeat, he had that a lot. Now you can obviously make the case that he could have lost less or whatever, could have done other things, and I'm sure Daniel will agree with that also. But he was a little bit out of his element. I mean, he felt that he could compete because it wasn't always top players. When we played high-stakes poker, we get a businessman thrown in, you get other people thrown in who weren't going to be as good as he was. So if he wouldn't have run bad, he probably would have still done fine. But he got off to a bad start. And you see this in poker. Even with me at the World Series this year, I got off to a bad start. This kind of a microcosm of that. You get off to a bad start in something, and now you start making worse decisions. And so we all saw this, and it's happened to all of us in poker. That's exactly what happened. If he had got off to a good start, he would have started playing better, more than likely. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. I remember the first year, I don't watch much of this stuff. I watch the ones that I'm on. So I know Daniel has bad results, but I haven't watched the shows that where I didn't play with him. The first year, remember, he bought in for $1 million, and he splashed around. And the truth is, he didn't play that well. Part of it, he was trying to be a showman and whatever, and he got stuck. I think more than $500,000. It looked like he was going to lose the whole $1 million. He won it back. Actually, he started playing much worse, and then he got lucky. I think against Antonio and against someone else, he won several $100,000 back. Actually, not playing that well. And I even mentioned at the time, I said actually he wasn't playing that badly at the beginning, but he got unlucky a few hands. Then he started playing badly, got lucky, got it back. Well, then what happened? We go to season 2, and he had season 2 might have been the hand where he had the set of 6s against Gus's set of 5s and got Gus hit quads. He loses that huge pot, biggest pot in the history of the game, and then it's like he was always playing from behind. He's always like now trying to recoup, and each season he get one of these bad beats. So he would have, he's obviously a good poker player. He would have continued to get better at cash game poker in this setting if he had not had such bad results. So then what he did, which was actually a smart thing and a smart thing for any poker player to do, maybe most of them can't afford to be playing against the top players at the highest stakes. They don't have as much money as Daniel. So maybe, I would have recommended starting at the lower stake, getting down to 10-20, 5-10, whatever game he would have fit in, and then advance. But he could afford to play against the best players, and that's the way he wanted to do it. But he would have gotten better on high-stakes poker probably, although it's not like it's a lot of sessions. It looks like it because they break it up over a period of a year. It's really just 1 or 2 playing days normally.
Right.
So now he's going back and he's learning, and I'm sure, I take him for what he's saying, that he's learning from these guys, and he's getting better. I'm sure he is. The funny thing is, all these things that he's learning may not translate that well and may even hurt him going to the tournaments. Because when you get back in the tournaments, it's a different skill set, and you're playing against different players.
Right.
It's almost like, I give an analogy in my book, and that's like when you play at the top limit, you're trying to be a college professor. You're trying to be at the top level of no limit hold'em. But when you go into the tournaments, you need to be a kindergarten teacher, because there's some people who just aren't thinking at that level, and you're doing too much. You got to learn some simple things of what they're doing. You shouldn't be overthinking yourself, and you can do that if you're always playing against top cash game players.
Now, just a couple more questions for you, Barry, then we'll let you go. What's your take on all the problems with some of the other online sites? Obviously UB, they had some security issues recently. Then all of a sudden, Cake Poker, their network, there's problems there. It's almost like, how does this happen? How does this keep happening over and over again?
Well, I really haven't followed the problems of the other online sites. I know about the UB thing, obviously, because Joey's involved. I heard about the Cake Poker thing, but I haven't read anything about it. I don't really even know what to say about that stuff. If issues, and we haven't had those kinds of issues in PokerStars. Most of the things I deal with in PokerStars are, what new games to put in, what new features, and what we do in PokerStars is look at, if something's done well somewhere else, we try to do it better. That's the way you make your software better. So that's that's what I'm doing at PokerStars. And as far as problems with other sites, like I say, I don't know why they're having these problems. And we have, as far as security and support, I think we have it the best at PokerStars, and it helps that it's the biggest site at this point. We have the most money to throw at those problems. We have the most manpower to throw at those problems. So that gives us an advantage, and
that makes sense.
Well, part of the solution to a lot of this, as is legalizing it and regulating this. And there's been a little bit of a breakthrough, it seems, in the last week or so with this HR 2267 bill that I guess has advanced somewhat. I'm sure you've been following this. I know you're involved with this. What's your take on this bill? What are the pluses and minuses of it, to the best of your knowledge? And where would an established site like PokerStars and Full Tilt Poker, for that matter, where would they fit in a bill like this?
Well, no one's 100% sure what's going to happen, and I think people were thinking, oh, this bill went through committee, and that's what it is. There will still be markups and changes as it goes through the House of Representatives and eventually the Senate. And, of course, one of the things that scared some people is this provision about anyone who's operating illegally in the United States won't be given a license. And, as far as we're concerned at PokerStars, we're not operating illegally, and people say, oh, how can you say that? It would be illegal if we were in the United States operating an online site. We're not doing that. I actually think those provisions will be for some of the sports betting sites. It is illegal remember, this bill that we're talking about had nothing to do with poker. It was online gambling. Mm-hmm. It is illegal. There's something called the Wire Act, where sports betting through these types of mechanisms is illegal. It is illegal for you to take sports bets over the internet. It isn't illegal for you to play poker. When I get off with you guys, I might be playing some poker online. There's nothing illegal about that. If I were running a site from the United States, that would be illegal. So I don't think PokerStars or Full Tilt are in trouble with that. I think that'll all get clarified that there isn't anything illegal there, and there's that I expect PokerStars to get a license once this stuff all goes through.
Don't you feel like this is inevitable, Barry? I mean, I know that we've been feeling like this, should have happened a few years ago, but it's taken time. I don't know, we're 3.5 years or whatever since that port security thing was tacked on to the end of the bill. It is inevitable it's going to be legalized and regulated, don't you think?
I think it is, and the politicians we talk to say it's inevitable also. It's just what shape it will take. Like you heard some things discussed. We don't want people using credit cards. We want them using debit cards so they don't run up a bunch of credit playing online poker, stuff like that. They don't run up a bunch of debt. So there are those types of things. The problem is, as we found out, these politicians work pretty slowly. And on the one hand, you could say that that's frustrating and that's wrong or whatever. But the real truth is they've got bigger fish to fry. We've got problems in the economy. We've got a war in Afghanistan and Iraq. We got all these things going on. They have bigger issues. They wouldn't even be addressing this issue if we didn't hang that B, as in billion, number along with the poker initiative, that they can tax this and get that kind of money. If it didn't have that in, this would be one of those things that wouldn't even be addressed. But because there's a lot of money, and because there are projects that politicians have that need money, and they see this as a possible way to get that money, that's the only thing that even has them going along with it. And we have lobbyists in the PPA. A lot of these guys know that if they look at our issue, and fundamentally people say, okay, privacy, your own home, play poker, that doesn't sound that bad. So with the lobbying we've done, contributing to campaigns, different things like that, we get to talk to these people. We get to find out that the majority of people in the House and in the Senate are on our side, that they would pass this bill if it takes the right form. And, right form meaning they want to protect, underage players. They want to make sure that it isn't a big thing. There aren't problem gamblers, that's not a big issue. And they want to make sure that instead of this money going to third world countries that house online sites, the sites are, as you've seen, one of the big things they kept saying is the employees have to be in the United States, so they can regulate it, and it, all falls under our laws, which, as we all know, when you talk about scandals at UB or whatever, if those companies are in the United States and regulated, that will certainly be good for online poker as far as people being able to trust it and know that if something funny happens, there is recourse. If something dishonest happens, there will be recourse. So it'll be good for the players in that way. I'm still always leery as to how is this stuff going to be taxed, how heavily, because again, you're always afraid it's going to be passed down to the player. We've seen this recently in France. PokerStars went into France. They have this board where they end up taking money even pre-flop out of the pot, and people were boycotting PokerStars and blaming PokerStars. And PokerStars actually on this particular thing, obviously overall PokerStars makes a lot of money, so no one has any sympathy for PokerStars, but losing money because it was taxed so heavily. So I wasn't, even representing PokerStars, that sad to see the players complaining, because what I was hoping would happen out of this was PokerStars could say to the government, we can't have games if you guys tax it so heavily, and we have to pass that down to the consumer. We need to lower that tax. So hopefully by the time things come around the United States, the tax won't be so heavy that it becomes a burden on the players also.
Sure. Well, listen, we have to thank you for all the work you've done with the government and the PPA and everything you've been involved with. Also, the stuff you do on Poker Road, we love it. The Life of Ivy stuff, I mean, that's like crack. Can't get enough. I mean, obviously, the video blogs you do and Poker, I mean, all that stuff is really, really cool. So, and thanks a ton for coming on with us. You spent an hour, over an hour.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Oh, you want to keep going?
Okay. The first thing, I get to call my shots on these interviews too. Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about, Phil Galfond is involved in Poker Static. He's a good guy. He's a poker friend. We don't know each other real well, but we certainly talk some. Some people think that, like I read, Poker Static is now a competitor to Poker Road. I never look at stuff that way.
Right.
I look at that if people like the kind of content you guys are producing, then they're going to look for more, and we have it on Poker Road, and that's one way I look at it. I don't see that if Poker Static does well, Poker Road's going to do badly. It's probably just the opposite.
We agree with you.
People who are thinking like that are thinking it incorrectly. The other thing is what often happens with this type of stuff is if you guys come up with some good innovations, we see this even in, let's say, a Poker Stars versus Full Tilt. Full Tilt came up with graphical last hand stuff, where PokerStars initially just had it in the chat window, and you could get your hand histories in text.
Right.
Well, part of my job at PokerStars is features, games features. So I said to the technical team, we have to have graphical last hand stuff, and they fought me for a while. That's a pain in the neck, and is it really that important? I said, yeah, it is. We're losing some players. There are people who only play where they can see their last hands. Well, we did get it, and when we got it, we did it better than they did it. And so that's how you advance software. That's how you will advance Poker Static and Poker Road. We'll see things that here's something that's really funny that you guys don't even know. I saw you guys do one of your interviews, it was a video interview, and I said, hey, we should have some of that stuff where, like the Poker Beat, which is, I think probably our best show right now. It's like Around the Horn on ESPN. I said, we should have a video where you see the people like you're seeing us now. And I went out, and we're actually going to have a video, and I went out and looked for video conferencing software. And the reason you guys are talking to me on this software, initially we were going to be doing it on what's it called, whatever you use, Skype.
Right.
But I downloaded this for PokerBeat. We now have all our guys on PokerBeat getting ready to do it in the Windows. Well, that actually came from me seeing one of your interviews
Cool.
And now saying, hey, this would be perfect for PokerBeat. So our community and our listeners who are now going to be viewers are going to get an advancement. And that advancement came from me seeing an advancement you guys made. And now we'll do it. And that's what's going to happen if you guys stay viable and get to, unlike us, get to where you can make money and you last, because it's a real challenge as Phil's going to see and your investors are going to see. Really hard to get to where you can make money off of these things in the post-UIGA poker world. A lot of sites, we've seen poker pages go down. Sites have had to either go down or make money other ways. Hopefully when the UIGA gets overturned, we'll all be able to make money because there will be more advertising. But until that time, it's a real struggle. But if we both last, what we're going to see is we're going to come up with new features and interesting things. Excuse me. And we'll have better content for the poker community. That's just the way this stuff works in software and in these types of things. So, we'll actually be good for each other. We'll make it better for our users.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, how long are you gonna keep Poker Road? I mean, I've heard you in many interviews say, it's hard to make money, it's not profitable. I mean, then I got to ask you, as a business person, are you going to keep it going forever? Is it like a year-to-year thing for you? I mean, obviously people love the free content. It's quality content. Or is that just sort of you just going to...
Now that Poker Static's here, we're just going to close up shop.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Well, really, the truth is we've got a really good community over at Poker Road, especially if you go on our forums. It's, 2+2 has its beauty in its numbers. You can find the answer to anything in 2+2, and you can get a response to anything. But it's obviously a lot of negativity, on 2+2 compared to, let's say, our community. We have such a good community and people who are really into our site and what they do and support it. And it's cost, Joey and I spend money each month to keep this thing going. And if people are wondering, they're always saying, hey, look, he took that cushy thing at UB, and a lot of people feel he sold out. I was unhappy with him doing that also. Although, he still contends that the current UB isn't evil like the things that were done in the past. Still the issue where I'd like to prove one way or the other that the bad guys are still somehow in there. The people who are running it, the old AP and, came off, let's say, Scott, Tom, whatever, some of his cronies are still there. If that's true, Joey would quit. Paul Leggett says, no, that's not true, and Joey's never been given proof of that. We'll see, hopefully, Haley, Hinsey, or the guys over at Wicked Chops, I think I can't remember who's doing the other thing, will prove one way or the other conclusively that no, bad guys aren't running that show. And then Joey can either say, okay, so it's okay for him to stick with it, or it's not. But anyway, that money he's made, he's taking his share every month. I say, Joey, hand over some money. We have bills to pay.
Right.
And we split it 50-50. That's what we do each month. It costs us money. We're still running negative. We're hoping, because we have a new group called, I think I can say, Protos. They do Pocket Fives and some other websites. They're much better at marketing and monetizing. They're involved with us now. And during the World Series, we finally got enough stuff that we're getting closer and closer to zero, where we won't have to put any more money in, and we'll start going positive. So we're still hanging on for that point where we don't have to put any more money in. I would have dropped it, and Joey was willing to drop it a year ago, because basically any money he's made through his sponsorship with UB, he's put back into Poker Road. And he put some of it into the World Series this year also.
And a beachfront condo. I know about his condo. I've seen it.
Well, his condo, actually, he got a really good deal. He isn't spending that much on that. He got a really good deal. And all that designer stuff, that designer did it free. I don't know if people know that she was in I don't know if it was a design contest or whatever, but she used that because Joey's so big on Twitter and everything.
Yeah.
Her people wanted her to get into social media, and Joey's the number one guy in poker in social media. So that was how that whole thing started, that he would tweet the things about his condo. She would get into Twitter. It would help her business. And
I followed it.
Right, so that's what all that was about. He actually got that whole design thing done for free.
Right.
So he didn't spend a lot of money on that condo, as it would seem. And so... No, and he's still driving the same truck that I got him when he graduated college. He's 33 years old. He graduated college, I think, when he was 21. Bounce his 10. It's more than that now.
Huh.
So he hasn't even, if people think Joey's living high off the hog, he has a good life. He's a single guy. He doesn't have a lot of responsibilities. But he drives, I think, a 12-year-old truck. Alex says 10. Okay, 10-year-old truck. 11. It's got to be at least 11.
It's the same year we moved down here.
Okay.
Well, anyway,
you're doing well on Twitter yourself. I mean, at Barry Greenstein, I follow you, and you
he shut it down though.
Account.
He shut it down after the World Series. He hasn't really been updating.
He did.
Well, I'm not into having my life on on Twitter. What do you think, Alex? What should I be like Joey say stuff about when Alex and I go out? And
well, no,
so, that's not my thing.
Well, you can start tweeting that once you start taking me out.
Oh yeah, I just got smashed there. Well, we were supposed to go out like each night last week because we're home now from the World Series. We wanted to go see Inception.
Right.
And then something came up each time. I had to do something one night. She had to do something. She ended up taking the kids. Yeah, I have kids. She ended up taking the kids. What was that movie you ended up saying? Oh, Despicable Me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, she went out and saw Despicable Me. Still haven't seen this after we were going to have this nice dinner and a movie. We still haven't done it. We had this place. Did we ever find that Brazilian place that we wanted? You know those Brazilian places where they serve meat on a stick or whatever?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So she said she found some place in like Manhattan Beach, and then she never found the right place. I don't know what it is. But anyway, no, I'm not going to tweet about that. I'll just do it for Poker Static. But the reason that I even started using Twitter is I used to have like 6 or 7 people who wanted to follow me in tournaments. Obviously, my girlfriend, Joey, Mimi, and a couple others always say, "How are you doing in tournaments?" And I would text them. And Twitter is such a nice thing for when you're texting a lot of people, so you don't have to like click all these different people on your send thing on your cell phone. So I said, okay, I'll just do it on Twitter. That's the reason I did, is for tournament updates, and that's still what I use it for. Now, because Twitter's gotten bigger, PokerStars wants me to tweet things like, I'm sure during the W Coup, I'll tweet something to get people interested in that. There are different things for PokerStars. They've now, kind of gotten into that also. So, as a representative of PokerStars, I'll do some tweeting. But I've never looked at Twitter as something to tell about the rest of my life on Twitter. Again, I think maybe if I were Joey's age, I wouldn't do it. He seems to do it, and actually it's been a good thing for him. He's, as I'm sure you know, he's got 1-some million followers. I don't know how much.
No, it's incredible.
A lot more than any other poker player. Yeah, he's got a lot of, and he's even gotten to the point where he's like, because of Twitter, like mainstream celebrities, he's got more than most of them. And he even has this thing where once in a while you'll see come across his Twitter, he'll tweet about a product. They pay him for that.
Right.
There are companies that will contact Joey and say, tweet about Firestone tires, and they'll send you $2,000 or something, or $4,000. So he can make money off that. It's kind of neat, new revenue stream for him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice.
Well, let me just say this though, Bret. I appreciate you saying that you don't consider necessarily Poker Static a competitor to you, and I know that all of us that are involved and have been there from the beginning and sort of putting this together, we never considered Poker Road some giant competitor that we had to take down this big bad guy. Not at all. In fact, we're all fans of it. So I know that we've had Joey on when we did Mediocre Poker Radio, just for fun on the side. We've had him on, love that. We've interviewed Phil Ivey actually years ago on our morning show. It's an honor for us to have you on, today with this, and I hope that we get to have you again on the future. And we wish you guys nothing but the best. We're big fans of what you guys do, and I hope everybody sticks around and does this kind of thing for years and years and years. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, it's growing. It's growing poker content.
Right.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of something that I was just telling Jay Rosenkrantz. He had given me these videos that he did. I assume you guys have seen him, his Busto to Robusto stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I like him.
And he's facing the same problem we are with him. He's got some good content. He doesn't know how to turn it into money. I don't know that he's trying to make money. He said it was a passion, but money to go back into the project type of thing.
Right.
But everyone wants him to do more online players and their stories because people like especially the Captain Zeba one, and the Andrew Roba one to some degree. I think one of the things we need in poker to grow poker is to show that there are other ways to make money in poker, in peripheral things like media, like you guys are trying to do it, and we are with Poker Road. With obviously there are magazines, there will be poker-related companies. For poker to be a viable thing, it can't just be poker players. It has to be these other things because, as we know, more than 50% of the poker players trying to make money are going to fail at it. So they have to be able to go into poker-related activities like the different media companies we have and make it that way. That makes it an industry. Right. And so what I was recommending to Jay is maybe for his next thing, he should take someone who didn't make it in poker but ended up making it some other way in poker, whether they built poker tables or had some other company related to poker. They made it as a businessman. actually, if you think about it, that's kind of what's happened to Joey. Is Joey started out playing poker. I was teaching him tournament poker. He actually got people like to put him down now, but he was a decent tournament player. He was like always one of the chip leaders at the WPTs. I think 7 in a row the second day. He was the chip leader at sometime the second day of a WPT. No one's ever going to duplicate that. He was getting to be a really good tournament player. He never got to be a top cash game player, but he was a good tournament player. Then Poker Road came along. He got into that. He didn't make money off Poker Road, but then he eventually, really from all his poker media stuff, got a sponsorship out of that more than his poker playing. So he's a guy who, in some sense, didn't make it through poker, didn't make a lot of money through poker, but he's now got a good source of income.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Barry, thank you very, very much again. We appreciate the time, and look forward to seeing you, continue to crush the tournament and continue to crush the side games there.
I haven't been doing enough crushing lately.
So you got over $7 million in earnings, so you've done okay.
Well, $7 million in earnings. I would guess I have 3.5. I think I tried to estimate 3.5 to 4 million now in buy-ins.
That's right.
And I gave away more than 3 million, and I paid taxes on different things. And,
oh my God!
And that was buy-ins. I don't think that counted even travel expenses.
Wow.
So overall, when you talk about what I've given away, it's tournaments. I've lost money on. As a matter of fact, my girlfriend's always saying, "Why do you even play tournaments?" Overall, I haven't made money in tournaments, even with cashing out $7 million. When you consider what I've given away and taxes and travel and all that kind of stuff. I mean, now in some sense I make money in tournaments because I have my Poker Stars contract, so I'll still be doing that. But so when you ask me, I guess this answers that earlier question: are you a cash game player or are you a tournament player? Overall, I haven't made money out of the tournament, so I guess I have to be a cash game player, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Barry, for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks a ton.
Okay, guys. Good talking to you.
Okay, take care.
Take care, Barry. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Guys, we appreciate you joining